Welcome to Finders Keepers, the vodcast powered by Asset Find. Here, we talk with the people shaping the future of global financial asset recovery, from industry veterans to technology innovators. Each episode uncovers new insights, real-world challenges, and the emerging tools helping companies locate and recover billions in unclaimed financial assets worldwide. If it touches finance, data, or discovery, we're talking about it here. This is Finders Keepers, where every conversation uncovers something worth finding. Well, welcome to today's episode of Finders Keepers entitled The Insolvency Asset Hunt. The reason we are discussing corporate insolvency is that when a company goes through insolvency, most people think about debt and restructuring. But there's another side to it, money that's simply been overlooked. During mergers, wind downs, or cross-border proceedings, accounts get missed, credits sit unreconciled, and funds can quietly go dormant. For insolvency professionals, it's not just about sorting out liabilities. It's also about digging for assets that may not show up on the first pass. And in complex estates, that hidden money can be more common than you think. And today, I'm really happy to be discussing this with Margot MacInnis. Now, Margot has had a very impressive career. She spent 25 years in the world of cross-border insolvency, asset tracing, and recovery. It's not exactly a light and easy field, but she has this steady and thoughtful way of handling extremely high-pressure situations beautifully. She's also been a big advocate for women in the profession. Through her work with the IWIRC, including time on the board and co-chairing its new network committee, she's helped grow the community internationally and speaks openly about the value of advocacy, supportive colleagues, and business coaching when it comes to building a career on purpose. Now, today we're going to talk about insolvency recovery and the often overlooked world of unclaimed assets. And I'm so looking forward to hearing her perspective. Welcome, Margot.
Thank you, Sean. I'm happy to be here.
Let's jump in. So, when you're first appointed to a corporate insolvency, what are the first things that immediately concern you?
The first thing we think about is simple. Where are the assets and who controls them right now? So for most Cayman structures, they don't keep their operations or records here on the island. The real activity usually sits somewhere else. That might be the management team or the trading systems, the bank accounts or their servers. So this means we often begin the job without a clear picture of what the company owns or what claims might have already been lined up against the assets of that company. So our immediate priority is getting control of the assets as quickly as we can. We want to make sure that they are protected and they can't be moved or dissipated or interfered with while we are still finding our feet. That might involve freezing accounts, securing digital wallets, preserving data, or stabilizing operations while the company's running. Once the assets are safe, we turn to the books and records, wherever they live in the world. We gather them, we review them, we start piecing them together to get the true financial position. And that includes understanding the liabilities, identifying claims, and mapping out what the recovery options are. So in short, the first phase is all about the control and protection. After that, we move into the investigative recovery phase, and that gets us to the final outcome for stakeholders.
So already a pretty involved process, and that's just step one. So as you move on, and when you're working with all of these documents, how reliable are company books and records in real world insolvency situations?
Honestly, it's all over the map. In some cases, you walk in and the books and records are beautifully kept, everything reconciles, everything's documented, and you can get up to speed pretty quickly. But that's never the norm. More often, usually in distressed or offshore situations, the records are incomplete, they're outdated, they're scattered across different countries. Sometimes the key people have left, or the access credentials are missing, or the data just hasn't been maintained for a long time. So you'll find gaps, omissions, or things that simply don't make sense. And that's when we really have to go into verification mode, cross-checking information, pulling data from third parties, and rebuilding the picture ourselves. So while some companies make life easy, those don't tend to be the ones that go into insolvency. So we're used to stepping in and piecing together what really happened from the clues we can find.
So a bit of a mystery, a bit of a scavenger hunt, a bit of a mystery.
We're the CSI of corporate insolvency.
Oh, I see our next episode that is coming beyond this. So I guess when you're in the midst of this chaos, what types of actual financial assets are the most likely to be missing or poorly documented, or is it just all of them?
Well, yeah. I think in our world, the ones that most likely to be missing tend to fall into the same categories over and over again. So that's cash. Cash and sort of short-term balances are the big ones because they move quickly, and the record keeping often doesn't keep pace. So intercompany balances are another classic problem. You'll see the numbers on a balance sheet, but no one can explain where that number came from or whether it's even real. Investment portfolios can be patchy, especially if the company was trading across multiple platforms or jurisdictions. And in recent years, digital assets have definitely become a pain point. Things like crypto wallets, tokens, platform accounts, because access credentials might be missing or the transaction history is incomplete. So it's not usual at all to step into insolvency and discover that a lot of these headline assets need to be rebuilt from the ground up before you can rely on the numbers.
It's just what you've come to expect when you go down this path. Now, there was something that you mentioned about jurisdictions, and so we all know that in the unclaimed property world and dormancy, the jurisdictions as it relates, the rules as it relates to unclaimed property and dormancy across jurisdictions are very different, and they vary significantly. Do you find the same thing, that corporate insolvency changes from one jurisdiction to another in your practice?
Probably quite a lot, actually. The basic idea is the same everywhere. You're stepping in to protect assets, deal with claims, and wind things down in an orderly way. But the way you get there can look very different depending on which jurisdiction you're in. So some places have a very court-driven process where you're, reporting frequently, and every major decision needs approval from the court. Others are more hands-off. The office holder has a lot more discretion, and to just get on with the job. There is a big distinction as between countries that apply common law versus those that apply civil rules and procedure. Then there's the recognition piece. If you're dealing with assets spread across multiple countries, which is almost always the case with offshore jurisdictions, you've got to make sure that the liquidation is recognized in those places so that you can get the control of the assets and enforce your powers as a liquidator. So while the big picture principles are familiar, the practicalities shift a lot once you start crossing borders. That's why coordination is so important, getting the timing right, lining up the recognition orders, and making sure everyone in each jurisdiction is moving in the same direction.
So a lot of moving parts, a lot of complexities. And as you mentioned, when you're talking about cross-border, which seems to be most of the engagements, it gets even more complex. So in cross-border engagements, how confident can you be that domestic records are actually capturing everything? I think I know your answer. I don't want
You say, want me to be truthful? Not very confident at all. When you're dealing with a multinational group, the records kept in any one country usually only tell a part of the story. So you might get a snapshot of what's happening locally, but the real activity, the cash movements, the intercompany funding, the trading, it often sits somewhere else. So we never assume the domestic books are complete. Instead, we treat them as a starting point, and then we go out and verify the picture across other jurisdictions. Speaking with local teams, we'll pull data from banks, service providers, counterparties, and compare that to what we have and try to figure out what actually happened in practice. So it's a bit like putting a puzzle together. Each country holds a few pieces, and you don't really understand the full picture until you've gathered most of them. That's why cross-border coordination is so important. So without it, you're kind of working on an incomplete map. But this is also the exciting part for my forensic nerd. Oh, I meant colleagues.
You said it, not me. Again, makes sense. Lots of moving parts and complexities. And I want to talk about something that I find, fascinating about this whole process. First of all, you're talking about all these moving pieces, finding the assets. Now, there's this whole human side to it. And when I think about having never been through the corporate insolvency process myself, I can imagine that on top of having to gather all these documents and, go through this labyrinth, there's also this human side. You're now in this very tenuous situation where, staff availability is, very scarce. People are upset, stressed out, potentially not very cooperative. And so, I can imagine that is a real issue, and you must have to sort of play this role of sort of psychologist and therapist, and also have a very high, degree of emotional intelligence as you approach, this problem. So how much would you say that impacts your ability to reconstruct the financial picture?
Oh, I think it has a really significant impact. I mean, and particularly where you get the chance to sit down and have those discussions, because in a lot of the cases I come into, the person who had control of the assets has long since run off to somewhere in Angola or elsewhere, hiding out. No offense to Angola. But yeah, it definitely has an impact. And in an ideal world, you would sit down with the key people. They'd walk you through the business and kind of hand over their records, and that makes it fast and easy and a lot cheaper for everyone. But again, that's generally not the world I'm walking into. Once you're into insolvency, oftentimes it's the result of a massive fraud perpetrated on the company by those who were in charge or had access to it. So in a distressed or contentious situation, the people who actually know how the business have fled, or they won't engage, or they've just disappeared. So the good news is that our teams are used to that. So from day one, we assume cooperation might be limited. We're built to do the heavy lift ourselves. That means pulling bank data, issuing third-party requests, using forensic tools to rebuild transaction histories and piece together the financial story without relying on management. I mean, would it be easier if they cooperated or stayed around? Absolutely. Would it save time, be less costly, and simplify everything? Of course. But we don't depend on it. We're structured and experienced enough to deal with it, and really, I sometimes like to think of our teams as a bit of the Navy SEALs or Green Berets of the financial world.
Oh,
So,
I like
yeah,
that brand. I like
yeah,
that brand. I mean,
yeah.
suffice to say, the red carpet is certainly not rolled out for you at any time. But on the flip side, it would be pretty boring if you didn't have that challenge, I guess, right?
No, absolutely. It's what gets you up in the morning.
So, on top of that challenge, maybe an even bigger or just as great challenge would be the fact that, I would imagine funding is really often limited at the start of an insolvency. So, how does that constraint affect investigative or recovery decisions in your process?
Well, this one really strikes a nerve because in many cross-border cases that we deal with now, the fraudsters have emptied the till before we even arrive. So there's no cash, no records, no cooperation, and funding becomes absolutely central to how we move forward. So when the money is limited at the start, we have to be very focused. Our first priority is protecting whatever assets might still exist. That could mean freezing accounts, securing digital assets, preserving data, or stopping any further value from leaking out of the structure. After that, every step becomes a cost benefit exercise. Where do we get the most traction? How do we do that the quickest with the least spend? Which actions have a real chance of leading to recovery and which are unlikely to get a return on investment? The deeper investigative work often has to be phased. Full forensic reconstruction, cross border enforcement, and complex asset tracing may need to wait until the estate generates some liquidity or we secure some external funding or litigation finance. Would things be easier if the money was there on day one? Sure. But in today's fraud heavy, multi jurisdictional world, you're almost always starting on the back foot, and funding shapes what you tackle first.
Right. So again, something that you've come to expect, and you navigate your way through it. Now, you know, in a regular situation, you would want to recover as much money just because, that's just the right thing to do. But you actually have a fiduciary duty to your clients. So how important is it really to locate all financial assets, not just what is obvious right on the balance sheet?
Well, it's absolutely critical. When you take on a fiduciary role, I mean, I'm often court appointed. You're not just responsible for the assets that appear neatly on the balance sheet. You're responsible for everything the company owns or has a right to, which sometimes is obvious. Lots of times it's buried, forgotten, or deliberately hidden. Um, In all the cases that we handle, the obvious assets are usually just the beginning. The real value is often tucked away in places the balance sheet never captures. That might be dormant accounts, side pockets, intercompany receivables, old investment no one's touched, or that were shifted around before the collapse. So you find value in unexpected places, overpayments, unclaimed receivables or property. That they were written off, but they still legally exist. So, in fraud driven cases, there's often off balance sheet structures or assets that were intentionally concealed. So, our duty and obligation is to go looking for those, not because it's fun, although there is definitely some detective work involved, but because every dollar we uncover directly improves the outcome for creditors. So, missing those assets is not a small oversight, and it could materially change what stakeholders recover.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of, with great power comes great responsibility. There's, I guess, a lot, even, more pressure to make sure that you're not just trying to see what's there, what the obvious is, which is, which leads us into, of course, the topic of, unclaimed, lost financial assets or things that go dormant. So at what point in this process, uh, you know, of insolvency do dormant, unclaimed, or forgotten financial assets usually come into focus, if at all?
Um, I'd say they usually come in a bit later in the process. That is after we've kind of stabilized the situation and reviewed the main records and started reconciling what the company believed it had. A lot of forgotten assets only appear once you start digging into the smaller details, and that might be old regulatory filings or third-party confirmations, identifying items that don't line up with the historical financial statements. So sometimes they surface because we're speaking with these banks and third party providers, or someone casually mentions, oh, there's still this balance sitting out there from years ago. Do you want it? And sometimes you find them almost by accident. So dormant accounts and unclaimed receivables and deposits, that were written off but never properly closed. So it can feel a bit like a treasure hunt.
Exciting to get to the end of the hunt, though. Nevertheless, rewarding to get to the end. Um,
Everybody loves the treasure hunt.
that's right. And then, why are these types of assets so easy to miss during insolvency proceedings?
I suppose because they often live in places no one's looking. So a lot of them relate to historic activity, an old investment, a deposit from years ago, a side account that was never closed out. So they may not sit anywhere near the company's core accounting systems. Um, and in turnover management, like decentralized operations, and the fact that many offshore companies don't keep their records in one neat location, that there's a lot of institutional knowledge that just disappears. So unless someone goes hunting for these assets, they can sit untouched for years. They're not obvious, they're not documented, and they're certainly not going to jump out of the balance sheet and introduce themselves.
Right. But again, that would be boring. That would make it not very challenging and not very fun. Thrill of the chase, right?
No.
Um, and so, based on your experience, how meaningful can recovered dormant assets be to an insolvent estate from a working capital standpoint?
Without naming specific cases, we've seen plenty of situations where these forgotten assets become game changers. So, one example is a long forgotten bank account in a foreign jurisdiction, maybe opened years ago for a specific purpose, never closed, and left with a meaningful balance. So, no one internally remembers it, and it didn't show up on the balance sheet. But once we tracked it down, it provides exactly the funding required to push an investigation forward. We've also uncovered legacy receivables that everyone assumed were worthless, or refundable security deposits with landlords or exchanges or service providers. So once recovered, these assets can materially move the needle relative to the size of the estate. So individually, they might look small, but collectively, they can completely reshape the financial outcome for creditors.
Makes sense. So we've talked a lot about sort of everything that goes on through the process of corporate insolvency. And as we've said, you have had a fantastic, very impressive 25-year career, which I'm sure have led to some very interesting stories and findings and learnings. But at the end of the day, what is it that gets you excited every day to get up to fill this role, so to speak?
I suppose I I really enjoy the intention and purpose behind this work. That there's, I take the role seriously that we're sort of guardians of the financial systems and world. That when things go really wrong, you need someone with an independent perspective and an attitude towards the situation, and that the work we do, if done well, can result in a meaningful return to people whose life savings have been ripped away or lost due to corporate mismanagement. So it feels good to take your investigative and accounting skills and do good with it.
And never a dull moment, I guess, right?
Never a dull moment. No, it's been an exciting career in terms of, I mean, I know I joked earlier about the CSI of the accounting world, but it's had a lot of travel. I've worked with some incredibly intelligent, capable people, and we've had some very kind of thrilling moments. Okay, thrilling for an accountant. To
It's all relative.
it's all relative, but thrilling results of finding your kind of literal pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. It feels good.
Any final words about perhaps the role of, technology in helping to recover, lost financial assets, and how that could help you as a corporate insolvency professional?
I think, and I don't know whether I might be alone in this, but for our profession, I mean, it's super exciting what AI and the digital tools are doing for taking large volumes of data and processing them quickly and giving you really good summaries of complex situations with missing gaps. Just it is incredible. It's changing the way we work in the same way that no one could have predicted Excel would change the way general accounting and audit was performed in this profession. It just revolutionized how people approach the work. It didn't change the results of the work and the value of the work, but it fundamentally moved it forward so that you spent more time on the stuff that was important and a lot less time on crunching data and writing out long lists of numbers.
Great. Well, Margot, it was an absolute pleasure having you on today. I hope that you'll come back again and again, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on your knowledge and some of the great things we can talk about. Thank you for your time, and thank you, everybody, for listening today.
Thank you, Sean.